The Comedy MX Entertainment Channel spotlights unique videos found nowhere else. Visit World Fairs, see atomic explosions, the golden age of trains, rare comedy features. You can even see the USA in your Chevrolet. It starts with a big capital E that stands for enjoy and never ends. So indulge your passions and binge watch all night.
His is one of the great American sagas. Some say the greatest. It started humbly on the night of February 11th, 1847, in a small red brick house in Milan, Ohio, the home of the man who ran the town shingle factory. On that February night, he sat in the parlor of his home. In the bedroom, his wife lay awaiting the birth of her 7th child. Death had claimed earlier children. So that the father's prayers filled the anxious hours until the father inscribed the name of a healthy, husky boy in the family Bible. Humble beginnings, but not poor. The Edison children were reared on good food and the good book. They were all good, hard, common-sense kids, said the neighbors, except for young Tom. They called him the curious boy, meaning he had too much curiosity about things. When he was 5, they found him sitting on some duck eggs to see if he could hatch them. It was possibly his first experiment. It was not successful. When the family moved to Port Huron, Michigan, the curious boy started school. He exasperated his teacher. The boy is backward, the teacher complained. All he does is ask questions. Nonsense, said the boy's mother. I'll teach you myself. And she did. Her method was reading, writing, and arithmetic. And then she simply encouraged him to read, read, read. The more he read, the more his curiosity grew. By the time he was 12, he wanted to know what the whole wide world was about. So he decided to go into business. 1859, the great railroads were beginning to crisscross America. Any 12-year-old boy would naturally go down to the railroad station to seek his fortune. Tom Edison talked the Grand Trunk Railway into giving him the job of selling candy and newspapers on the daily run from Port Huron to Detroit. He also talked the conductor into giving him a corner of the baggage car. In this corner, he set up a chemical laboratory. His curiosity didn't stop at chemistry. He got interested in printing when he was 14. So he set up his own printing press and started the first newspaper ever published on a railroad train, anytime, anywhere. The Weekly Herald, published by A for Al, as he was called, Edison, was only a single sheet affair, but he crammed it with general information and gossip. Local and international news. Business facts and figures. Vital statistics. Philosophy. Reason, justice, and equity never had weight enough on the face of the earth to govern the councils of men. But at the height of his success as chemist, candy butcher, publisher, philosopher, two accidents occurred. First, he became partially deaf.
Deafness drove me to reading. My refuge was the Detroit Public Library. I didn't read a few books. I read the library.
And he learned how to operate a telegraph ticker. The second accident occurred when one day his chemical jars broke open and set fire to the baggage car. The conductor put him off the train together with all his chemicals and his curiosity. He was 16 years old now, an unemployed candy butcher and newspaper publisher. But he'd also learned how to send and receive messages over the telegraph ticker. In 1864, he became a wandering telegraph operator, the fastest operator that ever came down the pike, also the most restless. Couldn't stay in one place for long. For 4 years, he ticked his way across the country, a kind of long-haired hobo, always tinkering with wires and things, but gathering no moss, making no money.
No matter what I may do, I reap nothing but trouble and the blues. It is all I can do to keep the wolf from the door.
But he was working harder than he was worrying, and he invented the universal stock ticker, his first major invention. Western Union paid him $40,000 for it. He took the money and invested in a dream. All during the hobo years, he had dreamed of building a laboratory. And finally, in 1876, he settled in the little town of Menlo Park, New Jersey. To his home there, he took his young bride, Mary Stillwell Edison. Close by the house, the main laboratory building was connected to the outside world by telegraph wires. The chemistry lab was the little candy butcher's dream come true. He filled his lab with the best technicians and the best machines money could buy. He was the first man to conceive of an invention factory, a hive of specialists on a belt line. At the top of the line was the old man, as they called him even then, supplying the ideas and the inspiration. He announced to the world,
I produce a minor invention every month and a major one every 6 months.
It was no idle boast, and the invention started pouring out of Menlo Park. To his deafness, he attributed one of his early contributions.
When Bell first worked out his telephone idea, I tried it, and the sound which came through the instrument was so weak I couldn't hear it. I started to develop it and kept on until the sounds were audible to me. My improvement, the carbon transmitter, made the telephone possible.
The repeating telegraph was a machine which automatically took down telegraph messages for relay at high speed. It consisted of a piece of thick paper which spun around a blunt needle, which made dot and dash indentations on the paper. One day, Edison was tinkering with the machine. The paper disc started spinning too rapidly, and through his deafness, he heard a strange sound.
If I could record the action of the point, and then send the point over the same surface again, I saw no reason why the thing...
Crucy, his chief machinist, made the model for a total cost of $18. A group of assistants gathered around the old man's desk. None of them knew what the fantastic-looking thing was supposed to do. They stood silently while Edison took a piece of tinfoil, inserted a mouthpiece on the contraption, and then, to everyone's astonishment, started reciting these momentous words.
Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go. I made a bet of 15 cigars that the machine would talk back to me. Mary had a little lamb, his face was white as snow, and everywhere that Mary went, the lamb was sure to go.
He won the bet. What should he call it? Telephone? Telegraph? He named it the phonograph. It became the sensation of the day and age. The 31-year-old inventor was invited to the White House to demonstrate his machine for President Hayes. Never in the whole history of science and invention had there been anything like this, a machine that talked, and the world clamored to listen to it. In restaurants and saloons and penny arcades, the first jukeboxes were installed. And while the words and music poured into every ear, the name of Edison was on every tongue. A philosopher of the time said it was the era of the nickel in the slot machine.
Every Saturday, Willie got his pay, then he'd call for Nell.
It was always Mr. Edison's own favorite invention. He was always bubbling over with new ideas for it, new applications.
On Nellie's little hat, there was
He had hoped the little box would be a great educational device, recording the Washingtons and Lincolns for posterity. But what the public wanted from it was entertainment. And the great names of the entertainment world hastened to oblige. Rachmaninoff, Metzenauer, Albert Spaulding, and even Sybil Sanderson Fagan, the whistling artist. And as the years went by, they trooped in and out of Edison's recording rooms. The opera singers and the banjo players and the bird imitators and the tellers of jokes. And the records poured forth, hundreds of them, thousands, hundreds of thousands. From the needle that scratched the tinfoil, $1 million industry was born. Shortly after the world had seen the wizardry of the invention of the phonograph, the Wizard of Menlo Park started a fresh notebook. It was the first of many on a new subject.
The object of this invention is to devise an electric lamp, which shall admit of being worked in great numbers on one electrical circuit.
The invention of the phonograph had been all Edison, but when he turned his luminous curiosity on the problem of making an electric light, he was moving into a field where many others were working. The first thing Edison did was to learn everything he could about the subject. He came to the crux of the problem. 1. If you heat certain materials by electricity, they give off light. 2. If you heat these materials in a vacuum, they last much longer. So he told his glass blowers in the invention factory to make him some glass bulbs. This would be his vacuum, in which he would heat something by electricity. Heat what? What would glow with a light that was continuous and bright and easy on the eyes? Now the laboratory became his home. Day, night, time itself meant nothing to him. He tried everything in the search for the proper thing to heat in the vacuum. After trying metals, he started on the world of organic matter. Anything, everything within reach. Human hair, wood, leather, macaroni.
Now we know another thing that won't work. That's progress.
Finally, one day he took a piece of common cotton thread and placed it in a crucible and baked it in a furnace. Out of the furnace came a thin thread of pure carbon. He attached this filament to electric wires inside the bulb. He pumped the air out of the bulb. He turned on the electric current. This was the light he wanted, but how long would it last? Edison and his assistants gathered around for the famous death watch of October 19, 1879. They watched the lamp for 10 hours.
Give it more juice.
20 hours.
More juice.
30. For 2 days and 2 nights, the lamp burned.
Now I knew we had it.
He invited the world, a world still lit by candles and gaslight, to come to Menlo Park to see. They came. On New Year's Eve, 1879, they came by the trainload and they saw. New light to the new world on this New Year's Eve, cried the press. The newspapers called it the miracle of the 19th century. Lighting up Menlo Park was only a stunt for New Year's Eve. The real test came when Edison announced that he would illuminate 1 square mile of the heart of New York City with a newfangled electric light. The bulb, the miracle bulb that gave the miraculous light, was only the beginning, the end component of 1,000 component parts. You need rheostats and generators and meters and fuses and sockets and switches and conductors to make it work. The incandescent light was not one, but 360 different inventions all welded together. To lay his lines and cables, he had to dig down into the bowels of the city. Edison himself supervised every move day and night. In later years, he was to say,
This was the greatest adventure of my life.
to make light, you need power. He took a building on Pearl Street in Lower Manhattan and turned it into the first power plant for electric light in the United States. It started with coal furnaces in the basement. The coal made steam. The steam made power. The power turned the generators. From the generators came electricity. And the electricity became light. Light to the world. But hardly 2 years after the great triumph, tragedy struck the house of Edison. He tried to lose himself in work, but to the great giver of light, Menlo Park was full of shadows now. He had to move away from the place where he had lived for 8 happy years. 2 years after Mary Edison died, he found a haven in West Orange, New Jersey, in the lordly house called Glenmount. In the year 1886, he was 39 years old when he married Nina Miller, herself the daughter of an inventor.
My later courtship was carried on by telegraph. I taught the lady of my heart Morse code, and we got along much better than we could have with spoken words by tapping our remarks to one another on our hands. Presently, I asked her thus if she would marry me. The word yes is an easy one to send by telegraphic signals, and she sent it.
And here he took his new bride to live. Beyond the fields of Glenmont, just down the road, he built his new laboratory. Brick this time, the finest invention factory in the world, the big brother of Menlo Park. The nerve center of the compound was the old man's roll-top desk in an office that was 2 stories high, crammed with 10,000 scientific volumes. It was his combination office, laboratory, studio, library, and bedroom. On a small cot, he took his famous cat naps.
I never found need of more than 4 or 5 hours sleep in the 24. People talk of loss of sleep as a calamity. They better call it loss of time, vitality, opportunity.
No matter how hard he worked, he could always find time for his children. When they were away, he wrote them playful letters to be read in a mirror. On one of their toys, the wheel of light now caught his fancy.
It occurred to me that it was possible to devise an instrument that should do for the eye what the phonograph did for the ear.
His first idea was to put a continuous line of tiny photographs on a cylindrical shell, just like a photograph record, then to rotate the shell and let the eyes look at the photographs through a magnifying glass. It didn't work well enough to suit Edison. Then he thought, if he could put a long line of photographs on some sort of strip or tape, on something you could roll up. One day he saw an advertisement for a new kind of camera designed by a man named George Eastman. It took pictures on celluloid.
Without George Eastman, I don't know what the result would have been in the history of the motion picture. He tried to develop a narrow strip of sensitized film that would operate on a roll.
Observe, says the legend, that each picture has a slight change of position as it passes the point of vision. The rapid photograph of these different stages of movement upon a long strip of light-sensitive film creates the illusionary spectacle of movable figures. In order to see the figures move, you look through the magnifying glass of a peephole machine.
Our studio was almost as amazing as the pictures we made in it. It was such an ungainly-looking structure when it was done, and the boys had so much sport with it that we called it the Black Maria. In order to make certain of as long a working day as possible, we swung the whole building on pivots, like an old-fashioned river bridge, so it could be turned to follow the course of the sun. It was a ghastly proposition for a stranger daring enough to brave its mysteries. But we managed to make pictures there, and after all, that was the real test.
They made pictures there. Fred Ott Sneeze, the first copyrighted film. May Irwin and John Rice, the first movie kiss. The story of an American fireman, the first story film.
Did you know that one of my first thoughts for the motion picture was to combine it with the phonograph? My plan was to synchronize the camera and phonograph so as to record sounds when the pictures were made and reproduce the two in harmony. Talking pictures.
Through a projector in his office, he showed the first home movies. The camera followed on one of his camping trips with his good friends Henry Ford, Harvey Firestone, and the naturalist John Burroughs. But in the ripe years of his life, he found it good sometimes to rest from the hard job of being a wizard. At his winter home in Fort Myers, Florida, his family and friends would gather round.
What do I think of Einstein's theory? I don't think anything of it, because I don't understand it.
And he liked to drive around the grounds of Fort Myers in a car given him by an old and grateful friend, Henry Ford, whose early experiments with a combustion engine Edison had encouraged. And he liked to sit and look at nature.
Good day for an angel's picnic. They could lunch on the smell of flowers and new-mown hay, drink the moisture of the air, and dance to the hum of the bees.
But even in Fort Myers, he couldn't sit still for very long. Close by his home, he built a small laboratory. His friends Ford and Firestone had presented him with a great challenge. Could he find a domestic source of natural rubber? The best source, he reasoned, would be something that grows in great abundance. What was more abundant than the flowers of the field around him? He started by testing every plant, every flower, every leaf, every growing thing he could lay his hands on. Thousands of them tested and carefully classified in his notebooks on his neat shelves. Finally, he settled on the goldenrod as the most practicable source of rubber. Why? Because it was so plentiful. He worked late into the night on the incredible notion of squeezing rubber out of goldenrod, though the famous catnaps were growing longer. He didn't give up until, out of the lowly goldenrod, he actually produced his last legacy to humanity. His desk at the West Orange Laboratory is as he left it, crammed full of innumerable projects, improvements on the old inventions, plans for many, many new inventions, telephone, telegraph, dynamo. He had taken out the incredible number of 1,097 patents in his 84 years of life, and still he could envision with youthful fervor
When I look around at the resources of the electrical field today, I feel I would be glad to begin again my work as an electrician and inventor. And we veterans can only urge upon our successors, the younger followers of Franklin and of Kelvin, to realize the measure of their opportunities and to rise to the height of their responsibilities in this day of electricity.
The year 1798 was not notable for the newly formed United States of America. John Adams was president, Thomas Jefferson vice president. In Hamden, Connecticut, just outside New Haven, a machinist named Eli Whitney, who had invented an apparatus for cleaning cotton called the cotton gin, was trying to persuade the southern plantation owners it could do the work of 50 slaves. Orders trickled in from the South, 2 from Georgia, 1 from the Carolinas.
Have your men make haste there, else we shall lose the tide. Is that the last of them?
Yes, Mr. Simpson, it is.
Good. Glad to see we're shipping a few gins anyway. As one of the backers of this business, I can tell you we're scraping the bottom of the barrel just to keep going.
I'm sure Mr. Whitney appreciates that.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Can you tell me where I can find Mr. Eli Whitney?
In his office. This way, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Whitney?
Mr. Jefferson, come in, come in. Did you just come from Philadelphia?
No, Boston. As you're so close to the post road, I thought I'd pay you a little visit. I have one of your cotton gins on my plantation, you know. Works very well, too.
Well, I have you to thank for it, helping me get the patent.
This is an unofficial and private visit, Whitney. I've been through all New England talking to the ship owners. The situation on the high seas is very bad. Going to get worse. France is firing on all ships leaving our ports, trying to keep us from trading with England.
I've heard that. A lot of our local boys sail those ships.
We've reached the point where we have to fight for freedom of the seas. It may even lead to war.
Oh, I hope not.
So do I. But we've got to be strong. Strong enough to convince other nations that we are capable of protecting our shipping. And to do that, we must have arms. Cannon. Muskets by the thousand. That's why I've come to you.
But why me? I'm not a military man.
You could manufacture muskets.
I know nothing about muskets, Mr. Jefferson. I've given all my time to the cotton gin.
A man who can invent a machine to do the work of 50 slaves should be able to devise another to do the work of 50 musket makers.
Oh, it isn't that simple. You speak of the cotton gin as an accomplished fact. The truth is, I have obligations, deep obligations. I've borrowed money. I've made promises to my men. And now, when I feel in my heart that cotton gin is finally going to succeed, you ask me to give it up. I'm sorry, but it's more than I can do.
I understand perfectly. Whitney, we're a young country. We must prosper and grow. But today we're in grave danger. If we are to survive, we must call on men with initiative and daring. Men who think in big terms. You, Whitney, are such a man.
I'm sorry, Mr. Jefferson, but I can't see my way in this.
You must take time to think it over. I don't expect you to decide immediately. We'll hear from you.
They're saying in Philadelphia, millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute, and they're right. Will our country let freedom perish? Are our sons and brothers no longer safe upon the high seas? Who is France that she should threaten and seize our shipping? Try to impress
What's
our
happened?
seamen.
The New Haven Queen went down with all hands.
No, neighbors.
That's Jonathan Stepson's ship. Joel Seymour's boy was the mate.
Aye, Stepson and Joel are inside now, comforting each
Come
other.
Take a stand. Let no man flinch. We've gained liberty. Shall we lose all now because of faint hearts? Aye, cowardice in our midst? Who is there among us who will not fight to the last drop of his blood to maintain our rights before the world? Aye, patriots, rally to this cause.
I came as soon as I heard.
Glory over dishonor, of freedom over servitude, and of victory over death.
It isn't the cargo I think about. Ned Seymour, Jack Prescott, Adam Hathaway, all those New Haven boys on my ship.
He was going to sign off. Stay home. You were going to have him work here.
Isn't there some way to stop this?
I don't know.
We must have arms, cannon, muskets, thousands of muskets, thousands of muskets, thousands of muskets.
The money you gentlemen have loaned me during the last 2 years has made the cotton gin possible. Your faith and patience have brought us to this moment. We have just received our first large order for 100 gins from the Carolinas.
Good.
Oh, wonderful. In another 6 months, I had planned to pay at least 1/3 of my debts to you.
What do you mean had planned to pay?
I'm giving up the manufacture of the cotton gin for an indefinite period.
What? You aren't serious.
I'm going to make flintlock muskets for the government.
You've let those firebrands talk you into this. You know there's not going to be a war. You know it as well as I do.
I had a talk with the vice president.
If you'd keep your infernal ships off of the high sea,
You're a landowner. What right have you to tell me how to run my business?
Stop arguing, you two. Now, sir, what crazy idea is this?
Our country is threatened. We have to recognize this.
there's no reason for us to get involved in a war. It's tomfoolishness.
Surely you can put the safety of the country above everything else, Goodrich. You fought in the Revolution.
Ah, that's another thing. No man can accuse me of not standing up for the country.
Talk to any seaman and you'll find out how near war we are.
You know we could take all this away from you if you stop making cotton gins.
Yes. But I don't think you will.
What are you going to do about money?
That's for the government to decide. Do I have your approval?
Well, it's going to be hard for me.
You're the one who stands to profit the most if your ships are protected.
I didn't say I wasn't going along.
With Jefferson asking us to do this, I don't believe we should refuse. I'll go along.
Well, I don't like it. I don't see the sense to it. But count me in.
Stepson? Good. I felt certain you'd stand by me. So certain, I posted a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury yesterday morning.
What's that?
I have a copy of the letter. Perhaps I'd better read part of it to you. Should an actual war take place, or the communications between the United States and the West Indies continue to be as hazardous and precarious as it now is, my business of making a patent machine for cleansing cotton must, in the meantime, be postponed.
I should like to undertake the manufacture of 10 or 15,000 stand of arms. Why, this Eli Whitney must be a madman. Other musket makers talk in dozens, a few in hundreds, and he talks in thousands.
I had hoped to find such a man.
The government can't afford to try every harebrained scheme that comes along. It would drain the Treasury dry.
He isn't harebrained. I think if he's willing, we should share the risk with him.
But this is the people's money. We can't throw it away.
We're in a position where we have to take risks.
Then at least let us protect ourselves. If this Whitney feels so sure of himself, let him put up a bond to be forfeited if he fails.
I think Whitney is just the man to accept such a challenge.
Eli Whitney took up the challenge and commenced the first of many steps to transform his little factory into a plant for making flintlock muskets. There were new tools to make, and most important of all, new men to hire, men skilled in the art of musket making.
All right now, men. There are the parts. Most of you are familiar with them. My contract with the government is for 10,000 stand of arms.
10,000? You gonna hire us the rest of our life, Mr. Whitney?
Well, I'm getting on. Maybe my son can take over. He's nearing 7 now.
Mr. Whitney, you better give that contract back to the government. Just making all the parts for the lock assembly's a hard enough job, and the frizzen, you can make 10 of them before you can get one that's tempered and shaped right. Can't you?
Never had any use for firearms. I don't know what a frizzen is.
Look, this is the part the flint strikes to make the spark. That's what explodes the powder. It's the heart of the musket, you might say.
Do you see this? Do you see this? The frizzen blew to pieces on me once and put out my eye. That's how I lost it.
Then I'll appoint you to work on the frizzen.
What are you getting at, Whitney? I'm to work on that alone?
That's right. I want you to develop a machine or a tool that will turn out not one frizzen, but 10,000 all alike.
Oh, one man can't do
Each of you will work on a different part. In other words, men, I didn't bring you here to make muskets, but to make the parts for muskets by machines. Then any hammer will fit any lock will fit into any stock. Each part will be interchangeable, and assembling a musket will take minutes instead of months.
Eli, you're out of your mind. It can't be done.
And I've been making muskets for 30 years. No man's gonna tell me how to do my job.
How many do you average in a year?
Around 6, mostly 5.
You?
Oh, 2 or 3, but I got other chores to do.
You?
Well, I could turn out 6 if I had nothing else to do.
All right, that's 14 muskets a year between 3 of the best musket makers in New England. Now, you know what the situation between France and this country is. Whether we like it or not, we're near war. Now, how far would 14 muskets go? We all want the best for the country, don't we? Now, all I ask of you men is help.
Some folks didn't think we was going to win the revolution till we done it. I'll go along, Whitney.
You can, I reckon I can.
Time went on. The men worked night and day. Whitney was with them constantly, suggesting here, encouraging there. He did the work of all of them.
Whitney, I'll not mince words with you. You talked Goodrich, Stebson, and me into posting a bond for you. It will be forfeit if you don't deliver the first 4,000 muskets to the government in 60 days.
I know that as well as you do.
And you have yet to put one musket together. You're making all of us look like ninnies, backing you to the limit. And so far, nothing to show for it.
Nothing? Come with me, Hillhouse. That's nothing? Nothing. A perfect part.
Parts. The government isn't paying for parts. They want muskets. They're sending Captain Van Gant from the War Department down here to see what we've accomplished. Now, you'd better have something more than that to show him.
They'll get Talbot.
I'm through. I said it wouldn't work. I knew it wouldn't.
Hold on,
I
Talbot.
told you it wouldn't work. You can't make a frizzen that way. Nobody can.
But you were so close to last time.
Close. 53 times I've had one fail on me. There's not a machine on earth that'll do it. Oh, I want my wages and get out of here before I go crazy. As crazy as you, Whitney, and all of you. What good are all those parts you make if you can't make the powder flash in the pan?
He is right, Whitney. I'm ready to quit myself. How about you, men?
Get out. Let's go out of here. Get out, all of you, before I throw you out. I'll show you whether a machine can make a perfect frizzen. Quit if you want, but get out and leave me alone. I told you to get out. I mean it. Get out before I throw you out with my own hands.
He's been in there 2 days and a night now without food.
Hey, look. We got company.
This is Captain Van Gant of the War Department. He demands to see Mr. Whitney.
I'm sorry, sir, but my orders are to keep that door closed.
You can't refuse me. I have a right to see how the government's money is being handled.
I take my orders straight from Mr. Whitney, and he said nobody.
Mr. Whitney leaves us no alternative but to post this order of the court. If he can't pay his debts and won't let either the government or his creditors into the factory, he'll have to quit.
I need your help, Joel.
No, you don't, Whitney. Anything you do in front of us and Captain Van Gant, representing the War Department.
Well, since it was Vice President Jefferson's idea, any emissary from the government should be welcome on this occasion. I think I have a perfect prison. Unfortunately, I won't know for sure until I try one out.
They haven't got the right to see the musket until you've tried it. They'll want you to fire it, and it might be dangerous.
No, Joel. Come in, all of you. Captain Van Gant, you are about to see the assembling of a musket, the first of the 10,000 I agreed to make. I call my method of manufacture uniform production. First, here is a bin with musket stocks. Will you pick one out of the bin? Anyone.
I came to be shown, Mr. Whitney.
Very well. Ebenezer, go get a stock. Baker, you take one of those barrels you've been working on. Evans, you'll need the barrel bands. Cummings, a butt plate. And the rest of you, find the parts you've made and take your places at this bench in order.
Oh, I don't like
Do as I say. As for you, Talbot, I give you the honor of picking a prison and putting together the lock assembly. Take anyone. All right, Baker, bed the barrel on the stock. Evans, slip the barrel bands on. You know how they work. Cummings, attach the butt plate in its proper place. Whitbeck, the trigger guard. And now, Talbot, install the lock assembly. That you mark the time spent in assembly. That is important. How does it look, Captain?
It looks like a musket.
Will it fire?
Joel, some powder and a ball.
Eli, you're not going to fire it by hand. If anything goes wrong, look what happened to Talbot. Put it in the vise the way they always do it. Fire it by a string on the trigger.
No, Joe. We can't let our friends think we've lost faith in our own work. I'm going to fire it myself.
Stand back. That prism can fly to pieces.
That barrel hasn't been proof tested.
Stand clear, everybody.
I have the perfect target, gentlemen. The calling card you left me. Got it the first time, gentlemen. Well, Captain?
I did you an injustice, sir.
Before the day is ended, we will have many more like this. In 3 months, we can make almost any number.
Eli, I was wrong. My felicitations.
And so, over a century ago, in this little factory on the outskirts of New Haven, Connecticut, was developed the know-how and division of labor we have come to know as mass production, responsible for so much of America's greatness and strength, all due to the imagination, initiative, and daring of a man who rose up and triumphed over ignorance and error. One man, Eli Whitney.
This was a part of Boston in the 1870s, the age of Longfellow and Emerson and Lowell, of hoop-skirts and bustles, of gallantry and sideburns and most fastidious manners known as genteel. The Morse telegraph, just reaching our furthermost boundaries, was a common tool in Boston, the most familiar forerunner of the electric age. But still, this was the gaslight era.
Peter, remember we were reading today about the speed of light and the speed of sound?
Much faster, much faster.
Oh, light is so fast that we see the lightning almost exactly when it happens. But what about the noise it makes, the thunder?
That's a lot slower.
That's right. Thunder, the sound of lightning, comes to us at about 1,000 feet a second. So with a little arithmetic, you can tell from that how far away the lightning is. You know how?
We'd just as soon not know how close it is, eh, Sonny?
How can you tell?
As simple as 1, 2, 3. When the lightning flashes, count the seconds until the thunder comes. A second equals 1,000 feet. There. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here. 4 seconds away, so...
4 times 1,000.
Good. So the lightning was?
4,000 feet away from me.
Pretty close, that. Very close.
Thunderation. Too dag-nab close for your sincerely Willis J. Walton. That was a real rip snorter. I guess there's one advantage to being deaf like those dummies over there. They haven't been scared. Just look at them chattering away.
There are no advantages I can think of to being deaf. There is a special disadvantage, I should say, in being deaf to warnings of danger.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Better be dumb than deaf is what I say. But I guess they go together, right? Wrong. What did you say?
I took leave to differ with you. I said wrong.
I couldn't hear you. It looked like you said wrong.
That's what I did say. I said wrong, and you read my lips.
I can't read lips. Nobody can. And when you're deaf, you're dumb.
My dear sir, the organs of speech are in no way affected by deafness. The deaf person is mute simply because he cannot hear and hasn't been taught to speak.
A contradiction in terms, sir. A most illogical contradiction. The deaf-mute speech organs may be intact, agreed, but if he can't hear a word, how? How in the name of all that's sensible is he, an idiot, going to learn to say it?
Mr. Walton, my hearing must be failing me. I could have sworn you used the word idiot.
I did. And in many states, the law classifies them as idiots. And that's practical. No speech, no language. And you can't think without language. And you can't undo the work of the Almighty.
The Almighty is far more merciful to the deaf child than we, Mr. Walton.
Than we? What do you mean?
Nature inflicted upon the deaf child but one flaw. One little flaw, imperfect hearing. But we deny him speech by not teaching him to speak. And language by not teaching him to read.
Sentimental balderdash. Monumental poppycock.
Good afternoon, Mr. Walton.
Goodbye. Goodbye, you arithmetic scholar.
He can't hear you, Mr. Walton. Can never hear you. He's deaf. He was born deaf.
Well, for goodness sakes. Who was that with the deaf boy?
Him? Bell's the name. Professor Alexander Graham Bell. Young for a professor, but they say he comes from a family of teachers and writers. Guess he got started early. A Scottish family, the Bells. They settled in Brantford, Canada. They teach people to talk clearly. All kinds of people, stuttering folks, children, and important people, too. Ministers and judges and political leaders. This young Bell's father, it said in the paper, publishes many books that go by thousands all over the world, even to China. Can you imagine teaching people to say their words just right? Bell now, he lectures at the university, and he teaches the deaf to speak with some kind of system his father invented. The deaf can't hear, but there's a deaf young lady here in Boston they say can understand speech very well. That's Miss Mabel Hubbard, daughter of Gardner Green Hubbard. You've heard of Gardner Hubbard, lawyer and street railway man. One of our great families, the Hubbards. Well, they say the way this Miss Hubbard can talk and understand is a wonder. I guess she understands young Professor Bell all right.
If all those endearing young charms which I gave on so fondly today were to change by tomorrow and fleet in my arms like fairy gifts fading away. Thou wouldst still be adored as this moment thou art. Good evening, sir. Did you know that if we had two pianos here and I struck this G, the G of the second instrument would sound?
I suppose that second hypothetical piano could be made to play sympathetically the whole of Endearing Young Charm. Mabel, darling, I'm going to say a few serious words to this young man. Do you want to stay? I shall do some plain talking.
Stay, Father.
Very well, you stay. Now, Mr. Bell, you listen to me. We've gone into business together, you and I.
Yes?
When you outlined your idea of finding a way to send several more telegraph messages at the same time over one wire, we arranged, without formalities, without contracts, for me to enter into your plans as a partner. Do you remember that?
Of course I remember it. You and Mr. Sanders were to supply the costs of the experiment. You want an accountant?
I certainly do.
Father.
You are squandering, or at least mismanaging, the only essential asset we have in this enterprise. Do you know what that is?
I quite fail to follow. If you think for a moment...
Keep your seat, Mr. Bell. The only thing we can't get on without is you. Now, I haven't had detectives following you. It just happens, quite by chance meetings with various acquaintances of mine and admirers of yours around Boston today, that I'm able to follow your activities in some detail. At 9 o'clock, you are lecturing at Boston University.
The power of this apparatus, gentlemen, is to me almost the unsurpassed marvel of nature. This is a formidable piece of machinery, even in the ear of a baby. And yet, the buzz of the gnat, a dried leaf tumbled in the wind, has the power to move it, to make a telegraph to the brain.
By 11 o'clock, you had reached the Fuller School. The school has 3 good teachers now, but you stayed there for 3 hours and had nothing to eat but cake. How you reached the normal school by 3 o'clock, only you know. But there you were, starting a new class of prospective teachers for the deaf. I presume you've been in the laboratory since then.
Oh, yes. Yes, sir, and I must tell you...
Mr. Bell, these are all highly praiseworthy activities. I wouldn't have you drop them forever, but you've gone into business.
I realize that,
Gone into business with Tom Sanders and me to develop this new harmonic telegraph, a highly commercial and probably enriching enterprise. Remember? It seems to me that if you gave your full attention to the telegraph, you'd soon have time and funds for other things, and for work on that obsession of yours, the transmission of speech by telegraph wire.
Oh, yes,
I
sir.
just hope for all of our sakes that you slow down before you break.
I realize that, sir. Please forgive me. I am not well organized, but I came here to tell you something amazing, beyond anything we'd foreseen. This is a reed, Mabel, this simple little thing. We tune them, you see. 2 of them, tuned to the same pitch, will vibrate together when electric current is applied to them, while presumably reeds differently tuned on the same line will not react.
He means all reeds will be silent unless they receive impulses from instruments tuned to them.
Exactly. And the same wire, we hope, may be used for many telegraph messages at one time. Now, Tom Watson and I were preparing for a test. I was adjusting this reed, this very reed, in this manner. Watson was in another room operating the transmitting reed when I heard something. It was like nothing ever heard before.
Yes, Alex.
I ran to Watson and said, "What happened? What did you do?"
What had he done?
This. Just this. Hear it?
A slight twang, Mabel, a piece of metal vibrating. And so, Mr. Bell, what was the wonderful thing that you heard?
This same sound. Diminished, the murmur of it. This.
Really, Alec?
Don't you see?
Tell us, Alex.
A sound was transmitted. Not a signal, not the clack of a telegraph. This little thing moving over this coil had generated an infinitesimal current, varying, modulated like speech. It came from Watson over there to my reed over here. It duplicated exactly the sound over there in this reed in my hand. so simple.
I must say I'm still at sea.
If Watson's voice had vibrated his reed, I should have heard Watson's voice on my reed.
But you didn't hear it. How could you?
Well, by using a parchment diaphragm, sir. A diaphragm attached to the reed. By a diaphragm, very like the top of this hat.
You'll try it, I suppose?
Of course. Tonight, in an hour. Watson has been working on it all day. All shipshape, Mr. Watson?
All ready, Mr. Bell.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No, Tom?
Yes, sir.
I should say something rather special. What if I can? Well, go to your post, my friend, and listen.
Yes.
Listen well.
Yes, sir.
Something important. And let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that. That man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that. Well, Mr. Watson.
I heard your voice. I'm sure it was your voice. I couldn't make out the words. I couldn't just catch them.
Now, everyone may not know that this first telephone was scientifically correct in principle, and that the original instrument has worked many times since under more favorable conditions. Bell himself couldn't know this at the time. So months of tireless study and rebuilding, endless testing went by. Months went by and winter came before the telephone performed a characteristic service with its first intelligible sentence.
Watson.
Come here, I want you.
Say, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell. Bell, I heard every word you said distinctly. You were perfectly clear. I recognized your voice. You said, Mr. Watson, come here. I want you.
Well, Mr. Watson, I did want you.
And that's how it happened. The telephone was a fact. But for all the acclaim of science, Bell still faced a skeptical business world that had to be shown the practical uses of the telephone. So he must perforce barnstorm with this great instrument of communication, hide his impatience, prove the obvious. He must have the good Watson serenade across the Hudson to the doubting Thomases of finance. From New Brunswick, New Jersey to New York, Watson serenaded the curious.
I am the invisible Tom Watson.
Everybody hears me. Nobody sees me.
Ahoy! Ahoy, Mr. Watson. Will you oblige us with a song?
All right,
Do not trust him. Gentle lady.
Gentle lady, trust him not. An amusing toy, ladies and gentlemen? I must confess I am a little weary of this circus sideshow phase of my work, a little impatient. I was in some haste to invent the telephone, for it has urgent work to do. Talks, sings, makes you laugh. Quite an entertainment, yes. But I want to see it buckle down and work. In my view of the future, the novelty will wear off. The instrument will be refined. It will grow light, convenient, and familiar to every hand. A common tool within the means of every factory, business, every home, and connected to a central switching office which can connect any two subscribers in a matter of seconds. And then I see its lines and poles marching thousands of miles, connecting the head office of every city in the land to the head office of every other city. And then I see, perhaps in the next century, the tiniest, farthest hamlet woven into the wire fabric. Doctors summoned. Disasters met and overcome.
So that was Bill in 1876.
When I was your age, starting in here at the laboratory, that's what impressed me most about Bill. Having done this great thing right at the start. I used to say that's the way I'll handle my career. However, now that the boy has grown older, you know, I get the same inspiration from the way he has carried on in all directions. The variety of the man's thinking. At 37, take a case. He developed with two associates the wax phonograph record. Financed it with an award from France for telephonic achievement. And all the earnings of the phonograph record patent went to founding the Association to Aid the Deaf. He initiated and extended the National Geographic Society's magazine. Reaches a lot of people now. And then the airplane. When Bell met Glenn Curtis and other aviation pioneers, it was much as your life was worth to back heavier than aircraft. But from that meeting of minds, the association then formed, came new ways of controlling flight. But he never forgot the deaf. He spent 6 years without compensation, taking a national census of the deaf. And it all ties together somehow. Widening horizons for the deaf, widening horizons of the mind, communications, transportation. Yes, you're lucky to be hearing him today. Lucky. He's 74 now.
Gentlemen, young gentlemen, it was suggested when I was invited here that I speak to you, the laboratory's newest, youngest engineers, about the telephone. But to tell you the truth, I am sure that in your technical training you have learned more about the telephone than I ever shall know. Thousands of patents and procedures and devices have been added since last I concerned myself with it. And I must confess that I haven't kept track. The telephone system today is a blend of thousands of minds and ideas. The first telephone also was a blend of many minds. No invention really can belong to one mind alone. Realize, gentlemen, there are no soloists, no prima donnas in science or engineering. One cannot learn enough alone. And I think it is this interdependence and the realization of it that tends to make science virtuous and not evil, harmonious and not discordant. Sometimes a junior scientist has fixed me with a jaundiced eye and charged, your generation has done it all. Everything is invented. Finish. To this I say it to you, as long as man suffers and wants and wonders, science's work is hardly begun. No doubt, some young scientist at this moment is dreaming a dream or writing an equation which, within your lifetime, will tap some source of universal power and dwarf all our engines and dynamos. What should you work upon in the laboratory of the shop? Well, my ideas are limited. Such as they are, I do not hoard them. I take the liberty of offering a few examples. Years ago, using a substance whose resistance changes according to the light that falls upon it, I managed to telephone for a short distance without wires along a beam of sunlight. Perhaps there is for you to find a way to make the light that passes through motion picture film reproduce the voice with clarity and range. Further, I suggest that disasters such as the Titanic encountered in the North Atlantic are unnecessary. There is a means, if you can but find it, of utilizing the echo principle, so that a ship's bridge may see or feel or hear an iceberg in time to change a ship's course. Now, I give you one of my failures to ponder. It has been very dear to me throughout my life. Before the telephone, I tried to build a device to record the human voice in visual and readable symbols. This, if you succeed, can have several practical applications. The immediate one will immeasurably benefit the deaf. You will understand why this means so much to me. By profession, by personal wish and instinct, I have always been a teacher of the deaf. This, then, is an assignment from me to you. A rather special thing in the greater picture of science. But, young gentlemen, I toss you that brand with this final word. Do not neglect those obscure corners where men work to discover the unknown, to prove the intangible. For here is dawn coming up. Here is tomorrow.
Many scientific minds working together in many places have since brought forth much that Bell's prophetic vision foresaw. The motion picture was given a voice. Radio and television were perfected. Life-saving mechanisms of sonar and radar were designed. They have succeeded, too, as he hoped they would, in turning spoken words into visible symbols that deaf children can learn to read as the words are spoken. In the laboratories that now bear his name, Bell's scientific heirs have taken a leading part over the years in the research that made all these things possible. Yet these are but eddies in the main channel of telephone research, as step by step we move toward the realization of Bell's early dream. His dream of a day when anyone, anywhere, can talk clearly and at a moment's notice with anyone, anywhere else.
And let us pray that come it may, as come it will for all that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be for all that.